Well, hello ladies and gentlemen, it's that one noob here today, and as you can see, I have the Kennerton Odin in for a complete review today. Now, first off, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the good folks at Kennerton Audio Equipment for extending me a loan of close to 3 weeks just to cover this amazing flagship. And you know what? I have come to the conclusion that this is indeed one of the best headphones that I have had the opportunity to try. Now, this is a bit of a big statement, so I'll explain further on in the review. Now, before I go further, I do have a bit of a small PSA to make to any of my subscribers, and in fact, anyone who's just watching this video. I am currently in the process of moving from Singapore back to the US, so you will see my review progress rate slow down a bit. Don't be surprised, the channel's not gone inactive, it's just that I do have a lot of things to do and a lot of things to clear. I think I'll be back around December 17th-ish with the Felix audio release, but I guess the timeline there isn't firm. Don't worry though, I think we've got some really interesting stuff lined up for December and hopefully for the new year 2017 as well. So I think with that being said, let's just get started with the review proper. Now, as I mentioned in my unboxing video, Kennerton Audio Equipment is in fact the luxury arm of Fisher Audio, and it is indeed a cost-no-object look at what could be achieved by Fisher Audio engineers in the pursuit of perfect sonics. And I have to say the result is rather spectacular, especially in the form of the Odin. Now, before we get to the sonics though, there are some practical design issues that I think we do have to address here. And one of these is just the general finishing on this product and the attention to detail. From a distance, the Kennerton Odin looks rather rugged. It's got a very nice rustic feel to it with either the walnut or supeli wood cups, you take your pick, the metal yoke, and just genuine sheepskin, lambskin, all around the headphone. In fact, Kennerton is very proud to say that there is zero plastic on this headphone. So that's quite the statement there. But overall, the finishing does let the headphone down a bit. Now we start with the headband design. Now the headband design is a two-band system with a rigid band on top and a softer band below. But after a while, it seems that that there is a bit of a pressure building up at the top of your head, and that's probably because the lower band is contacting the top band, so that's not exactly comfortable. The other thing is that, as you can tell, I'm going to zoom in a bit here, the stitching on the side of the headband is quite rough, and after a while it does start to come off. You can already see, let me zoom in, you can see the threads just popping right off right here. So that's not exactly impressive for such an expensive product. Now the other thing is that the headband adjustment system needs some serious work. Now it's a single screw system, so if you unscrew it, it lets you move the yoke down along two axes, both vertically and side to side. But the issue is that there are no markings. You do not know if you should happen to unscrew it or just adjust it, you won't know where your previous fitment was, and you have to go through this long process of trial and error as you try to get the right length and just the right angle of your cup. So that's just a bit annoying, and frankly, it's not something that we should really be seeing on such an expensive headphone. I understand that the ear cups are heavy, but even then, there needs to be a more elegant, more appropriate solution. You can't share this headphone with anyone else because you give it to them, they get their fitment, they can't hand it back to you immediately. So I guess in this sense, it is rather personalized. Now, all that aside, I'd also find the ear pads to be slightly uncomfortable. As mentioned before, this is lambskin, but the lambskin here is full grain. So you get all that wonderful texture, but you know, really, it's not that comfortable to wear. I get that it's more durable, but is that really necessary for a headphone that's supposed to be treated nicely anyways? Now, the ear pads aren't particularly plush. They have a solid bit of resistance, and overall, it doesn't help to make this headphone any more comfortable than it already is. Once again, it's 670 grams. If you wear this the wrong way or you tilt your head to one side, you could potentially get a neck cramp. And you know, I'm not particularly weak. I used to play water polo, but even then, this did give me a good workout for the neck muscles. Now, the other thing is that we have a... Okay, I'm not going to mince my words. I do not like the stock cable at all. It's rather annoying and just... Oh. Okay, anyways, let's get started. The terminations here are the mini DIN, so I think these are the same terminations you'll find on an Odyssey headphone, so it's okay. They feel fairly solid, nice metal with a chrome finish. You just have to depress the button and just pull them out, and to insert them you just plug it in. No problem there. But the rest of the cable is covered in what I think is called Tech Flex, or worst comes to worst you could just call it some sort of PET braided sleeve here. And the thing is that here, as you can see, I'm gonna try and zoom in right here. Oh no, come on. I'm trying to get the right focal length. Okay, alright, come on. Okay, I think the camera is not wanting to focus properly, but there we are. But in fact, these two individual cables come out way too close to each other, and this braided sleeve just ends up rubbing against each other, and it starts to unravel, which is a bit disappointing for a headphone of this price. Now, the last thing is that the cable termination is a 3.5mm jack, which is more or less pointless if you ask me. I'm not sure why they decided to go with this design, because this is meant to be a home setup, and you know, we shouldn't really get a cable where we have to consistently use a 3.5 to 1/4 adapter. I mean, it's just kind of incongruous and doesn't make much sense to me. The included adapter, which I don't have on the table right now, is in fact a 90-degree adapter, which once again, not fit for desktop use. All that aside, the cable is rather microphonic. It makes a solid scratchy noise should you rub the cable together, and it doesn't lose its memory. It wants to stay coiled like that. So in general, just not a very nice cable as far as stock cables go. Now, we move on to the sonics, where I do think the Kennerton Odin does perform admirably. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the frequency response chart right here and the CSD right here. If you're interested in knowing how I took those measurements, please click in the link to the written description below. I go over some of the considerations and design details in further detail. Now let's talk a bit about the Kennerton Odin's sound more specifically, and in a more subjective manner, of course. The Kennerton Odin presents music with an easy realism that's just really pleasant, and it's a very good headphone to listen to. It doesn't embellish its sound, it doesn't exaggerate certain sonic characteristics, and in that sense, it doesn't always pop out at you. You won't go, wow, look at that bass, wow, look at that soundstage. No, in fact, it takes a bit of time to come to appreciate the Odin, but if you listen to it long enough, you'll realize that it's wonderfully balanced. It has great textural quality, especially in the mid-range, and its tonal balance really leaves very little to be desired. There is a thing or two that I'd like to talk about regarding the bass section of the Odin, but I'll discuss that in further detail later. Now, overall, the dynamics on this headphone are also very good, and it just comes together to make a very versatile audio package. Now, it goes without saying that the Odin amplification should be fairly easy. This headphone is just a little bit warm, and depending on how you like your sound, you could either push it towards the colder, more analytical side, or push it towards the warmer and lusher side. It all works. I've tried this with the TIAC UD503, the Cord Hugo TT, and just a bunch of other amps, and it just works on most setups. I didn't feel that there was any one setup that really failed the Odin in any sense. Now, one of the things is that the Odin does sound better on balanced connection, especially in the sub-bass region. So with that, let's segue into a discussion about the bass. Now, the bass section of the Kennerton Odin is pretty fast, clean, and just generally speaking unobtrusive. It's not offensive in any way, and it fits into a more neutral so-called audiophile tuning. I find that the Kennerton Odin sub bass to be just a little bit lacking in terms of presence and detailing. And as I mentioned before, I was actually suggested by fellow headfire Earphonia to use a bounce connection, and that did indeed bring out more texture in the sub bass. However, overall, compared to certain other headphones out there, the Odin doesn't have all that much detailing in the lowest of frequencies. I was listening to Debussy's Sunken Cathedral, and when we reach that climax, the Odin just sort of falters and tapers off. And I guess sub bass isn't one of its greatest strengths. That said, the mid bass has good body and punch, and there's really nothing wrong with it. The best part about the Odin are its mids. I was listening to male vocals such as Nat King Cole. I know the recording quality isn't brilliant, but you just get the sense that there's a lot of texture, but no graininess. It's not chesty or forward, and it just fits very nicely. The female vocals are even better, and on sustained notes, when you get to those very powerful solo tracks, the Odin just walks through like it's nobody's business, and it has this presentation that's both clear and very vivid, and also just, generally speaking, very, very good to listen to. Now, the highs on the Odin are pleasant, they're well extended, but in some ways, they're like the sub bass, they're a bit inoffensive. And I did find at times that they were a little smooth, and perhaps it's just my personal taste here, but I do like a crisper sheen to the highs, especially when I was listening to like classical tracks like Schubert's String Quintet in C major. You've got to be able to hear the difference between the slurs and the staccato, but the Odin doesn't always capture that particularly well. In fact, some of the staccato sounded way too smooth to me, and I guess that's just a bit of a personal preference thing. I used to play the cello, and I guess I am very particular about the way such details are conveyed. I know my personal preference is the T1, and I know there's people who absolutely cannot stand the highs on the T1. I'll get to that later, but when it comes to certain classical tracks, the Odin highs just aren't as articulate and don't have enough texture, in my opinion. Apart from that, the Odin as a whole sounds very good. Like I said, the tonal balance is on point. Imaging and soundstage are just fine. There's really nothing to complain about. With that said, let's talk a bit about some select comparisons to help contextualize the comments that I've made regarding the Odin sound. Okay, so I did have the chance to try the Odin against several popular headphones. I have heard most of these headphones quite a number of times and for several hours now, if not more. I've really spent a lot of time at my local headphone store, Zeppelin, trying out and getting familiar with some of these headphones. The first one that I do want to talk about is the Odyssey LCD-X, which does share certain characteristics with the Odin. In many ways, the presentation is rather similar, I guess, but the Odin is far more refined. Now let's start with the bass. The LCD-X has this very tight, punchy, and fast bass that just hits hard, but it almost seems a bit kick drummy, especially in the mid bass. On certain tracks, you don't need that kind of a punch, but it still continues to do that. Whereas the Odin does not. The Odin traverses it with relative ease, and it also just shows a lot more detail, especially in the mid bass region. I know that's surprising because most of the time you don't associate mid bass with having any texture or detail, but the Odin can show that, honestly. The vocals on the Odin are a clear win, in my opinion. While the LCD-X mids are very clear and they do have power, I do feel that they're almost a bit aggressive and occasionally even a bit thin, compared to the LCD2, of course, which is rich and lush. And I do feel the LCD2 does better in this regard than the LCD-X, but neither can touch the Odin. Now, the treble on the Odin is more similar to the LCD2, whereas the LCD-X has this kind of a unrefined and occasionally hot treble. So, in that sense, I think it'll come down to personal preference. One general note, all of these headphones are uncomfortable to wear. The Odyssey, I never thought I'd really say this, but the Odyssey is in fact the more comfortable headphone with the plusher ear pads. Alright, I think that really helps to give you a sense of the weight and the kind of ergonomics we're dealing with when we talk about the Odin. Now, the other comparison that I do want to make is the Biodynamic T1, and I'll pull up a comparison chart right here. Now, the T1 has an upper end tilt, as you can see, and it kind of goes from the upper mids into the highs, and you do get those liquid highs. But I think there's a common misconception that the T1 is kind of a bass anemic, treble happy mess. I think for the early production versions, this was indeed the case, but I do have a late serial in the 21,000 range, and I really don't feel that my listening corresponds with some of the things that have been said on online forums and reviews. So in that sense, perhaps I do have a penchant for a slight upper end tilt. That's a very fair statement, I think. But also, I just like to draw attention to what I consider to be one of the cheaper but still amazingly well-performing flagship headphones. Now, both have fairly linear mids, with the T1 being tilted more in favor of the upper end as mentioned before. I find both to be very agreeable, and I can't say which one is more realistic, though I do know the Odin draws more texture out than the T1. So, while the Odin I think is just a bit more laid back, it does in some ways feel more appropriate on certain tracks. You don't always have to be as close to the singer as is rendered on the T1, you know. With the highs, I do feel the T1 is better. And I was talking a bit about that classical track previously. The T1 does not run into any of the issues that the Odin does. And in this sense, I do prefer the T1. Imaging is similar, but due to the upper end tilt of the T1, soundstage and perceived transparency is a bit better. From a practical standpoint, though, the T1 is far lighter, and you know, it's just a more pleasant headphone to wear. Now, one of the last comparisons that I do have the time to make for is the Focal Utopia, and you know, I really was rather excited to listen to the Odin versus the Utopia because both of these headphones join the natural class of headphones, and they do make for a very interesting comparison. Generally speaking, the Utopia is more involved, with a better sense of imaging arising from its speed, micro-detail retrieval, and generally superior technical ability. However, bass-wise, both headphones do take a moderate approach, and I do feel that the Odin once again loses out to the Utopia, as the Utopia just extends deeper and has better articulation in the sub-bass. Mids are on par, which is very impressive, I guess, considering the price difference between the Odin and the Utopia. I do feel the Utopia is just a bit less textured, but you know, it's not exactly something that would completely give one headphone an edge over the other, and which one is more appropriately realistic is something that I've really yet to decide on. However, I do feel that with female vocals, the Utopia does generally perform better, especially on those sustained notes where it just sounds a bit cleaner than the Odin. Highs on the Utopia are naturally better than the Odin. It's just much more articulate and better extended, but it doesn't give the sense of being bright by any chance like the T1. I would say that the imaging on the Utopia is of another class. You tend to get the sound coming in from all different directions, and the first time I heard the Utopia, I was simply stunned by just the amount of space being conveyed by both the soundstage and just the general imaging of the headphone. Now, once again, we have to realize that the Odin and the Utopia are of different price classes, and the fact that the Odin holds up so well against a much more expensive headphone is just a testament to what a good can it is. So I think at the end of the day, if you're looking for a new primary driver headphone, something that has a natural sound that really does give you a very appropriate presentation of sound with good staging, I would say you have to consider the Kennerton Odin if your budget allows for it. It's really one of the best headphones out there that I've heard, and you know what? I'm just hoping that everyone who watches this video has the chance to at least give this an audition and just take a listen to what a good can this could be. Now, once again, guys, it's been That One Noob. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate that you took the time to stop by this channel, and see you again, hopefully very soon, in the United States of America, folks. Take care.